today, so congrats that you're here. If you don't know me, I'm the valedictorian of the class of 2018, but you may also know me from being in orchestra or just being a funny student, and or just walking the halls. I would consider myself funny and smart and extroverted somewhat, but I'm also autistic. So what does that actually mean? You've all heard the statistics, right? 1 in 68 people are diagnosed with autism. Autism rates are higher than those with cancer, childhood diabetes, and AIDS combined. And there's no cure for it. Congratulations, guys. You all know about autism now. You obviously know nothing about it. Those statistics alone don't tell you anything about what living with it actually means. So, I did a survey about it. I released a survey that some of you may have completed about what you think autism is. The highest responses that I got that were incorrect were that it's a disease, that it's a mental disability, and for some reason that it's a chromosomal disorder. It's none of those things. Or, maybe those vaccines when I got when I was a child, maybe that infected me. No, that's not what it is at all. So what is autism? It's a neurodevelopmental disability that happens at birth. You get it through genetics. Most scientists agree that most of it is genetics. So I inherited it when I was a little embryo. My brain developed, and it produced an overproduction of synapses, which are connections between different neurons. So what this means is that my brain may be overdeveloped. But scientists aren't really sure about this. This is just a hypothesis that they've come up with as of late. It is present since birth, but symptoms become apparent between 2 to 4 years old. And this is the case whether it's apparent that you're autistic at birth, or you learn to speak and then somehow you start to lose those speaking abilities. It's still genetic. It still happens at birth. And since it happens in the brain, this means two things. One, it can't really be induced by the environment, so I'm born with this. And two, there's no way to fix this because it literally interferes with the way that I think. It's part of that. You can't just remove that because you remove my essence. So I've placed the symptoms into 3 main categories. The ones that you've probably heard about are communication and socialization. Autistic people may have a delay or absence of verbal language. So I was in the category that I didn't learn to speak until I was 3. And some autistic people don't speak with their mouth. Another thing is that there's difficulties in expression and receiving social cues. For me, for example, I honestly do not know how to start a conversation. So I'll be sitting in the corner and I'll be waiting, for someone to approach me and talk to me. And until I realize that, I'm supposed to start the conversation myself. I also have problems with modulating my voice, so when I speak, my voice can be very quiet, or it can be very loud, but very inconveniently, I don't notice this. So this can make social communication hard for me. It doesn't mean that I don't have things to say. It just means that I don't know what to do in every specific tiny little example to initiate it. Another thing that factors into this, though, is sensory input. This isn't emphasized a lot, but I feel that sensory input is the core of all of the difficulties that I have. My sensory processing is different than everybody else's. Your brains have the wonderful ability to filter out external stimuli. What this means is that you go into a party, for example, and you can talk to a person very well because you're just focusing on their voice. But that doesn't happen with me. I can't hear their voice because I'm listening to the drinks being poured out, food being served, shuffling of the chairs, the person next to me at the next table. And so this also impacts my communication because I can't talk to other people if I can't hear them. It also impacts me because I can't wear certain clothes. I might not like a lot of different types of foods. For example, sour candy. So as a result, since I can't filter this in my brain, I need to use what's called self-stimulatory behavior, or stimming. What this is that sometimes I fidget a lot. And I fidget a lot because my brain can't filter out all this extra information. So if I'm feeling excited, I might shake my hands or clap them a little bit. Or I might rock around. Or a lot of times in class, you'll see me throw a pen every once in a while because I'm trying to fidget it and then it eventually escapes my hands. The last category I included is learning and executive functioning. My brain, because it's wired in a different way, means that I might not learn in a standard way. For example, when I was in first grade, I remember having a lot of problems learning algebra or just simple math skills like adding and subtracting. Now I'm in multivariable calculus. It's a very big discrepancy, but it shows you that I learn skills differently. I had an easier time learning calculus than I did about adding. I also have narrow and deep interests, which is very evident from this whole presentation that I gave. I'm also obsessed with video games, and I love chemistry. And if you're unfortunate enough to be around me, I might talk to you at hours and hours and hours. But how this influences me most is that I have problems with executive functioning. And this includes skills like planning, executing the tasks I need, and just initiating them in general. So even though I am the top student in small high school, I still have trouble starting my homework. Which means I stay up late, do my homework, go to school, get tired, delay my homework even more, and it's just a very vicious cycle. Note that this has nothing to do with how smart you are. They're two completely different things. Because I've helped with executive functioning, this means I need to have consistency. If I don't have consistency in my life, it feels like my life falls apart. I don't have any foundation. I don't know what to do. How do I start this task? How do I continue with it? How do I block out the noise that's outside? Or the feelings of stress that I have inside me? So planning, or need to have a plan, isn't a symptom, it's more of a coping mechanism. So this is a video of me and notes.
Yeah? Alright, let me see the coin. Where's the coin? Well, can you put the coin in your hand up? Whoopsie. Alright, yeah, see the coin? Okay. So let's see you make it disappear now. Wow! Hey, who are you? Can you show me who you are? Tara? You're Brianna the Great? You're great. Yay!
Aw, how cute. So, besides from being the greatest magician of all time, you can see that autism has affected me since I was very little. In that video, you can see me rocking a little bit, and then I got happy. But I also had problems following instructions because that requires executive functioning. When my dad said, put the coin in your hand, I just started doing what I did before. And you can tell that I have a very flat voice in this video. But thankfully, the magic makes up for it.
He was trying to be gentle towards you so he wouldn't scare you, right?
So I got diagnosed with autism when I was 2.5 years old. And it's actually a pretty interesting story. Because that has nothing to do with the symptoms of it. I had difficulty speaking when I was younger. So, for example, when I was 1, I would go and dance to the music, and I would go, I would sing to the music, but I didn't know the words. So my mom brought me to my doctor, who told me, she's just laying in here. But she didn't believe this. She took me to an ear, nose, and throat specialist, who found a big wad of earwax in my ear. I had severe ear infections, to the point where if it wasn't treated at that time, I would be dead today. So they put tubes in my ears to drain the leakage, and then they sent me to an autism specialist just to make sure that there was nothing else going on. And coincidentally, I was actually autistic. So they put me into speech therapy. I learned how to speak. But the interesting thing is, I may have not been diagnosed until much later if it wasn't for my ear infections. You may learn that 4 in 5 people with autism are boys. But that doesn't account for diagnostic criteria that may be focused toward boys. When they created this criteria, all their samples were boys. So if there's differences in autistic boys and autistic girls, then they wouldn't be diagnosed until much later, and it would be misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder or depression or anxiety or eating disorders, and I could have been one of those girls. So I'm so thankful that I had the help I need starting from a young age. I got put into Wall Primary School when I was around 3, and they helped me learn executive functioning skills, like learning how to tie my shoes. I was in an environment where there were people like me that I could play around with, while also having that one-on-one attention. But also during that time, there wasn't a lot of hope that was instilled into my parents. One of my teachers told my mom, expect that your child will ever be in a regular school. She'll be put in a special needs school. I'm here today. But that just motivated my parents to give me even more supports, have more time in the school so I could get the supports I need and not let my autism diagnosis limit me from my potential. I got to elementary school, and I didn't really know how to socialize. So I was put in socializing groups. I had other autistic kids like me that I could interact with, and I could also learn basic skills like manners and how to respond to specific situations. But for some reason, this didn't really help me out in school. Like I said, I don't know how to start a conversation. So I would sit in the corner, be very quiet, because that's what the teacher wanted. I wouldn't speak up, I wouldn't get loud, because then that's not what you're supposed to do in the classroom. I only had one good friend in elementary school. And I was even bullied because I didn't learn basic skills such as adding and subtracting. So that really affected me negatively. And I thought, from a very young age, I have to suppress any differences that I have. I have to look as normal as possible, so that way people can be my friends. And that's a very stupid goal. Like, how many of you wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to be so normal today? But that's what I was told by my circumstances. It got worse in middle school. Because even though I was thriving, even though I was aspiring to be the best student I could be, to get the highest grades possible, my only friend left me without any warning. And I was alone. I had no friends. The friends that I did make were behind my back and talked about me. I became so insecure about myself that I restricted my eating, and I didn't gain any weight for 5 years. What angered me even more was autism awareness. I'm sure you all recognize this ribbon, right? Putting the puzzle together. But why am I puzzled? Why are people so mystified about autism? Couldn't they just come to me and ask me about what it was? I'm sure there's more people like me that are around that can go up and speak to. Why did I need fixing? Why was I somehow broken? Why did we need to find the missing piece of the puzzle? Then I heard in the hallway curse words based on disabled people, like retard and autistic. I heard people in the presence of other autistic people criticizing them for doing movements that help them regulate their environment, for not having all the social rules of society, for communicating in a different way than they're used to. This further instilled in me that I needed to be the same as everyone else, and only through that I could be like them. But it was destroying me in the process. I had such low self-esteem. I began developing anxiety and depression. The view that changed me, though, is a view called neurodiversity. And this became slowly instilled in me throughout high school until I learned about it just last year. Neurodiversity is the principle that everyone's brain is different, which is scientifically true. Everyone's brain is different. So the neurodiversity paradigm takes us into a new light and introduces a new view about autism. It says that autism is a natural, beneficial variation of human diversity. So instead of saying that I have restricted interests, it says that I have passionate, deep interests that can help benefit society. I have different viewpoints than other people. I can see, even though I can't see the bigger picture sometimes, or may think of things literally, I can see details very well, which helped me become the student that I am today. It also says that there's no normal way of functioning. Because just as I have my own difficulties, my own strengths, so do you. Your brain isn't a model brain just because it's the most common brain. And finally, it says that the social dynamics of autism are like that of culture, or being left-handed. It shouldn't be compared to things like cancer, because I'm not going to die because of my autism. You're not going to die because you're white, or that you're a man, or that you're a woman. The advantages of this viewpoint are very numerous. I have friends that eventually came up to me in sophomore year and in junior year that just liked me for who I was. I was quiet, I was very nerdy, and they loved that about me. Most of them didn't even know I was autistic. I began showing myself as who I was. I broke out of this shell of insecurity to become more outgoing and, going into fancy. I feel like the most visual difference you can see, though, is this picture. I went from 90 pounds to 110 pounds because I was no longer insecure about myself. And I feel like that's the biggest reason why I should adopt this view. It changed me from chronically underweight to a healthy person. And I think this is a healthy view. So how can you help people that you know who are autistic? The first and most crucial aspect of this is something called presuming competence. What this means is that even though somebody in front of you appears socially different from the norm, let's say they're rocking back and forth and clapping their hands and only interested in puzzles and won't really speak to you, you have to assume that they can understand you. Autism affects communication, but it doesn't affect how I think. It doesn't affect how confident I am in thinking. I can still form opinions. I can still have views on different topics and have solutions for those different topics. This is why I believe labels like high functioning and low functioning are useful. Because any person, no matter if they can speak or if they can force themselves to be normal, have opinions that are worth listening to. So when you talk to these people, don't treat them like a baby. If somebody is 15, then treat them like they're 15. It's as simple as that. The Second thing is to listen to true autistic experiences. In the media, most of the stuff I heard in middle school was from parents. And I was questioning, well, why don't they ask the autistic people? So I'm saying go listen to the autistic people. All of these people are autistic. They're not parents, they're not friends, they're not siblings. They experience autism in their everyday lives. And notice that on the left side, those are people who can speak. They have blogs, they do social speaking, they talk about neurodiversity, they try to promote it more, they get active in different organizations. But these people all do too. These people can't speak. They've never learned to speak, some of them. But they use communication devices, and they still have blogs, and they still do public speaking. They still participate in organizations. Just because you can't speak, again, this doesn't limit your ability to do things in life. So it's important to get the whole idea about what it's like to be autistic from actually autistic people. These are also some famous people that have or were thought to have autism, such as Temple Grandin, Dan Arkioi, who was the creator of Ghostbusters, the director of Space Odyssey, Charles Darwin, whose collection of various different species might have been his special interest, but helped him develop views of evolution, and Albert Einstein, who didn't speak till he was 4. This isn't a manifestation of them just being a savant or something. This is what happens when you allow autistic people to have the supports that they need while accepting that they're different to flourish in society. The last thing is to donate to reputable organizations. I'm sure all of you have heard of Autism Speaks and their Light Up Book campaign and stuff like that. But the real truth of it is that they're not a good organization. If you notice on the pie chart, they only spent 4% of their money toward family services. The rest of it went into research. And what is this research for? Is it for researching different ways to adapt autistics to their community or to promote acceptance? No. Since their founding in 2005, their mission statement literally stated that they wanted a cure for autism or prevention for autism. Autism is in my brain. It's part of my wiring. You can't get rid of that. It's an integral part of who I am. So they had a lot of controversy around this, other actually autistic people. So they got rid of that statement. But now they have programs like Missing, which is very wrongly stated and very prejudiced, that will find genes linked to autism and use this to give it to researchers, physicians, and genetic counselors. They're spending, 32% of their money for research that goes into abortion and prevention, and nothing that actually helps the 1 to 2% of the population who lives with autism every single day. It's said to donate to these reputable organizations. The top 2 organizations, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network and Autistic Women's Network, are composed of actually autistic people. They're not parents, they're people who live with it every day of their lives that influence their opinions. They help promote acceptance of this, help go against laws that negatively discriminate against them, to give medical services to autistic people. The bottom 2 networks also have some autistic advocates in there, and they have some resources that can help children as well. And remember, when donating to any organization, remember nothing about us without us. Imagine if the NAACP had white people, or if a women's organization had men. It wouldn't make sense, and the same principle applies here. So, this is my presentation on me being autistic. So, what's my future? If the same negative perceptions about autism keep on occurring today, my future, as well as other autistic people's future, are going to be very bleak. 80% of autistic people are unemployed, especially because a lot of them have interviews, which are very social by nature. So it easily discriminates against people who don't have the same communicative abilities. If you promote neurodiversity, not only are you allowing or preventing prejudice to occur, but you're giving autistics more confidence, and you're able to see views that we have, and to promote more information and acceptance and contribution. And it also, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So I heard that back in like the 1990s or before that, there was a study that autism was caused by the mix of that it was found out at the same time that would then lead to autism. I know it's very
I know about the MMR vaccine, the most common one that people think of autism. It was released by Diagnosis. So it showed how many flaws and less money for research on those bias as well. And one new, well-timed study failed to link contact with autism. And there's also a big mess. So how can I get use of antibiotics when it's already in my teeth, you know? Yes. Because it happens on other ones. I developed it develops over time. Like, honestly, I don't know what else. I have a question that referencing but it doesn't mean it's not
Guys, it's the second time I'm asking. I have a question that's not a question.
Yeah.
What are your plans for next year?
I'm going to Monmouth University, and I'm going to be either majoring in chemistry or genetics. I don't have any services because I didn't apply for disability services because the grades are probably too high. But I live in a dorm so that way I can develop my executive function skills and learn how to live independently. So hopefully I can promote this for in Monmouth University.